There is only one genre in fiction. That fiction is book.
Welcome to AMI Audiobook Review, the weekly podcast where we chat all things audiobooks. I'm your host, Ramia Amuddin, with co-host Jacob Szymanski.
Yo.
And Nasreen Abdelmajid, our technical producer. What's up, Niz?
Hi.
Hey. And we're, the three of us, going to hold up the fort today. It's going to be fun. Is it hold up or hold down? I feel like it's hold down.
Hold
anyway,
down.
We're holding down the fort. We're holding up the show. We're going to talk books. On today's episode, actually, we're going to break things down into two parts. First of all, we're talking about our obsession, that's right, with rigidly classifying books into separate genres. My goodness, does it really need to happen? Do we really have strong opinions on this? And is it necessary? I don't know. Maybe it's a bad habit that us as a literary society, we need to start breaking. But there are a lot of issues that come with theming and genreifying and sorting. We'll talk all about it in the first half of the show.
And we've been just jumping to get to this topic, but later in the episode, we're also going to get to some answers from our question to the book club, which was, what are some books that left you with strong mixed feelings? So a book that left you equally enthralled as it was frustrating.
We've got some good responses for that one too. So
Yeah.
Looking forward to that. And of course, in a sec, we will give you the Sela homepage and everything else that you know are staples of the show. So where do you want to start with genre classification, Jacob? This is a big one for you. I'm still stepping it up and like even checkboxing through the list of genres and figuring out if I've ever read a book that classifies as a genre.
So Benjamin Franklin, one of the founding fathers in the US, in his biography, claimed that he invented the pros and cons list. That's total BS. That's like saying you invented reasoning. But I do want to employ a pros and cons list for this conversation because there are pros and cons to classifying everything into genres. I think it's something that has become somewhat outdated. Would you agree?
Yeah, and for the most part, yes.
Okay, here's the first pro. We're going to start with the pros, okay? Because there are still quite a few. The main thing is that it provides a clear path for readers to get to things that they know they'll enjoy. That's like the main reason that we do it, right? If you like magic elements, you're going to read fantasy.
Yeah.
If you want to read memoirs, and if you want to read about people's lives and stories, you read memoirs. If you want something that's like very real, that's what you get into. It's pretty straightforward.
But some of these genres have now become problematic even for this pro. We'll get into that. Okay.
Yeah, we'll get into that. The other one is publishers love genres for the marketing potential. Not just marketing, but targeting, right? Because they can get their authors to write things that will appeal to certain demographics and certain demographics that particularly read a specific type of genre. It's really
audience.
Basically publishers need genres to be able to sell their books, because imagine they just came out with a book. They had one of their authors write a book and they just said, here's a book, and people said, so what is it? And they're like, we're not going to put a label on it, you'll just have to read it. Nobody's going to read that. You need to know what it's about, right? Because you can read the synopsis, but I think the first thing that people check when they see a book is like the genre, right?
Yeah, of course. And it just makes it easier, right? It's kind of like how we think of keywords now or tags in different scenarios, or just making algorithms work. For all of this, there has to be some rhyme or reason for marketing.
And just logistically speaking, it makes a lot of sense to sort things into genres for libraries and places where you physically store books, because it couldn't just be mayhem where everything is just stored willy-nilly, or even in alphabetical order. That's basically nonsense. You need to store things in a way that makes sense, right?
And it cater to like educational purposes or whatever else. The genre still makes a lot of sense in that way. I don't imagine how school could have gone and readings during school could have gone if things weren't, even for pleasure reading, just categorized into different genres. Or like in English class, how are we supposed to speak on or break down certain assignments, literary assignments, without the help of genres. Yeah, it makes it easier for everybody. Okay.
Right. It's like you sit down to read something very casual, something that's a real page turner, but it turns out to be a tome that's just impossible to get through.
Mm.
Like there's a
Ugh.
reason genres exist. But I think one of the most compelling reasons why genres are great is communities form around them. Forums on the internet, YouTube channels dedicated to fantasy or sci-fi. Like they just review all the sci-fi books, all the fantasy books. Authors of similar genres are usually going to team up together and workshop their stuff together. And it's community is really, really powerful.
This part of it, it makes sense on big and small scales, right? Like when we're talking book clubs that are formed around genres, or like recommendations and how much easier that is for genres. Like it goes back to the first point, which is catering to people's interests and desires of what to read. But then the form of community around that is pretty obvious.
Another con I want to get into is the rigidity of genres undermine the fluidity of storytelling. There are always these tropes that
Hmm.
people expect in certain genres, and it stops people from experiencing books that they might otherwise not get to.
I think that this part is becoming less and less of a problem on one end of the spectrum
Why is
because
that?
we're seeing a lot of fusing of genres. Like, I rarely ever find anything that's just one genre anymore. It is genre A, B, and C.
It's a combination, right?
Yes. Yeah, it's a fusion.
Like
And
they'll do
that's
like
one way that
romantic
these things are being,
comedy or
yeah,
romantic
dramedy.
fantasy, dramedy.
Hmm. Hmm. It's historical fiction, it's whatever, like all of these different things that I think are not standalone genres of their own anymore. They're combinations of genres together, which I actually, when we get into it, I'll tell you, but I do find that to be somewhat frustrating. So with the fluidity, like I guess it's perspective, because it's with the fluidity of writing, yeah, makes sense not to pigeonhole yourself into a genre. um but then when you're looking for something specific, you're like, I don't know what this new genre is. What does this combination of genre mean I'm getting into?
I want to expand on that, Ramya. This is a great
Mm,
point. I just feel like when I go to any bookstore, there are genres that make no sense to me that I didn't know was a genre. And I'm wondering why that is. I feel like it just became a trend of whatever it may be. So it's not only just like a mix of two or three different genres all in one, but it became like, oh, trending, and that became a genre. I promise, TikTok became a
yeah.
genre. Instagram became a genre, and when you go into Indigo, for example, you'll see multiple different titles of genres that I'm like, wait, now this is a genre now, like.
This is a genre. Yeah. Yeah, that's so fair because like technically we're not even talking genres anymore, but these ways to categorize books have mm, become so prevalent, like Instagram, TikTok being its own category of how to sort out books, that they're up there with sorting books by genre.
And
I think that's what's
yeah.
really happening here. Like the way that you would look for something that is a memoir is the same way you would look for something that's just
But like, yeah,
TikTok
even
trending.
if you categorize it and it's, you think it's a category, but when you search it up, they list it as a genre. And
Yeah. Oh, really?
yeah, when you look at these things, you're like, okay, but
That's not now we're getting into the nitty gritty of what genre even means.
going back to Indigo, for example, like any bookstore, you look at the categories as genres. So like you look at fantasy, you look at comedy, you look at, the regular genres that you're used to. Um, and then you'll see trending on TikTok, trending on this, and then you'll see give me like a genre that makes no sense.
YA.
It is really like a genre because we treat it exactly like we would a genre, but our typical genre is fantasy, sci-fi, thriller, suspense, mystery. Those
Mm.
are all determined by what happens in the book. But the ones you just listed, Niz, TikTok and Instagram, those are
Those are like
identified by
people's
what
choice.
happens outside of that book. But it's still effectively a genre because we sort books into that category.
Yeah, no. I gotta
Not a genre?
disagree. No, it's not.
It's not.
It's a People's Choice Award. It's a, like, what's the latest social media trend? But when you go on TikTok, it's not that people are like, how generic is it just to be like, I loved this book, you should read it. That's just a recommendation. It's a social media recommendation. It's not. There's no categorization at
No, I
all. When
agree. I agree. I
hmm
don't feel like that defines a genre when it's people's
Yeah, no way.
opinions.
The word genre is just being tossed around like the word literally
Well,
nowadays.
listen, okay, if you take for example, trending on TikTok, all these TikTok users that are contributing to any given book that might be trending on that platform, they probably have a certain type of book that they enjoy. So wouldn't that mean that there'd be specific types of books that end up being on the trending on TikTok list? Because like TikTok has a certain
Yeah, but that's
demographic.
swayed.
TikTok like book fans would have certain opinions on books that would lean them to
Sure.
certain types of books, right? So there has to be a specific style that's common between all these books that end up on the trending on TikTok list.
That's fair, but that's also fluid. What trended on TikTok last year is not going to be trending on TikTok this year. Though the hashtag book talk stays the same, the kind of books and the style or like where we're going is changing legit
It
from week
becomes
to week now.
trended on TikTok.
Yes, that's the new genre. What's now trending. But when we say something is fantasy or sci-fi or whatever, as you said, it's from the book itself. It's a guideline or an understanding or a definition of what you will find in this book. You know what that means. I don't know what it means if something is hashtag book talk. That's that's just again a fancy
Well, maybe
recommendation.
because it's a bit new and it is a bit fluid, but all genres are somewhat fluid. Just because you pick
Eh,
up a sci-fi novel doesn't mean you know what you're going to get. Just because you pick up a romance novel doesn't mean you know
fair,
what you're going to get.
but you get the outline of it, if you will. Not formula, but what is it really that you get? You get the essence of what it's supposed to be. You know what a memoir is. You know what you're signing up for. Or maybe I'm not even talking about what genre is anymore, but I'm talking about the intention of genre as a traditionalist, which I
Mm.
now realize I am.
Well, you know what? Maybe this would play a bit into your beef with YA novels. I've heard
Yeah,
you make hints at
side
your issues
comments.
with that genre. Like, what's up with that?
Hmm. Okay, listen. What is YA as a genre? Okay, young adult is what YA stands for. And truly, if I may, shout out, not in vain, our conversations on Kelly and Rumia weekly on Fridays with Chatty Bookshelf contributor Ryan Hui. He often brings out YA novels. I feel like I may be too old for what is now considered YA. I don't even know what it means though. Like, is it just a target audience of writing style where, anything from 16 to 30, 35 years of age, you're targeting this age group with the contents of this novel? That's what I assume YA is aiming to do. But that makes no sense to me as a genre. It's not a genre at all. Again, it's like these TikTok and Instagram things, as Nasreen pointed out, where you're just creating a category, hoping that it becomes an algorithm or a buzzword or a hashtag, a tag of some sort, like a keyword thing, but you have no idea what it means. Like why it goes from anything to sci-fi to fantasy to superhero to drama to comedy to some real, some not. Like it is placed everywhere. I'd say maybe the writing is a bit more juvenile. Eh, but that I'm
Yeah,
gonna
I'd agree
get a
with
lot of
that. I think that's a
backlash on
common
that.
tag for that genre for sure.
Right. Because you're thinking like young people want to read this, but it's like a throw it out into the ether and hope it sticks situation. I don't believe in YA as a an actual genre. I don't think anybody knows what they're saying when they say YA. They're just kind of hoping for a target audience
But
of
in
YA.
practical terms, I think people typically use it as a secondary genre tag. It's going to be like fantasy YA, suspense YA, thriller
So
YA.
it's
And
fantasy for 18 to 30-year-olds.
yeah, that's how I interpret it. But I've also heard
God.
people say
But how
like,
is that different from fantasy for 30 to 50-year-olds? For middle-aged people, for the elderly.
I've seen a joke online, people saying that it's just books that are not boring.
Oh, okay. No.
Because I think when you try
Caveat.
to write for quote unquote adults, authors kind of fall in a pitfall where they make things overly deep and contemplative and like try to make it really important and say something
What? So it's
really
surface level writing for the non-philosophical? That's what YA is?
no. No, it's more like it's more accessible. It's just more accessible to everyone,
Mm.
where books that are specifically written for quote mature audiences, it's like they're trying too hard to be deep. They're trying too hard to be adult
I call
books.
BS.
Yeah.
Yes,
I kind of fall into that. I kind of agree with that because YA is just books that are accessible. It's like the Disney of books. Disney makes awesome movies.
No.
Yeah. Because it's
Yeah,
for the whole
but
family. It's accessible to everyone, but they're just as powerful as the books that are like for adults.
I understand what you mean when you say like it's accessible for everyone. I just feel like it's also innocent, not too innocent type of category.
like, does 50 Shades fall under YA?
No,
No,
What?
no. You're talking about young
absolutely not.
adults. Young adults is like 13.
Young adults is not children.
Yeah, but like
Or
it's in the
preteens for me.
Yeah, it's teens.
teenager category, right?
Young
sure.
adults is in the teenage category. 15-year-olds are picking up YA. Again, this is too gray. Like, it's not something that I can completely understand to then therefore agree or disagree with, because I think nobody knows what YA is.
Okay, well, I think this speaks to the point that we're trying to make with the past like 5 minutes of conversation
Uh-huh.
is that some genres are incredibly fluid and unclear. And YA is absolutely one of them.
Yeah,
I'd argue
take them off the
romance
list
is
of
another one
genres.
of them. Another con is preconceived notions and stereotypes. When you think of someone who reads fantasy, it's a sniveling dork that likes swords. If you think of somebody who really likes romance, it's like middle-aged women like reading in the bathtub while drinking wine. Like it's obviously not that simple, and it's not just preconceived notions and stereotypes about the readers of any given genre. It's also expectations and stereotypes about specific genres. Like YA, you think it's like written in a very juvenile way. That's not true. So some people might be tempted to just completely avoid books with a YA tag because they
Right.
think it's written in that
I
juvenile way, and
do.
it's not true. It's not true. Yeah, and you're wrong for doing that.
But I've been told or, led to believe that this is what YA is. And though I'm in the age group of being a young adult, in my opinion, I think that still it's, the way that these books are presented, like, it's like, I don't want to read this kind of writing. There's this preconceived notion, for good or for bad, when you think of these, what did you call it? Secondary genre tags?
Yeah, it's
Or
like
/
secondary.
stereotypes. Because I think stereotypes is a perfect way of looking at it. These are not real genres. These are like the expectations or the floof we've put around the genres to then make that its own thing. It's brutal. Can't keep up.
And there are stereotypes and preconceived notions for every single genre, and I think it's a problem
Okay.
because genres are fluid. Genres are fluid, and everything gets pigeonholed into our expectations. Next con, cultural stifling. This one's a bit vague, but I'll give you an example.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a fantasy guy. That's why I keep bringing up fantasy. But in fantasy, it seems like everything takes place in a world that's based on Western, like medieval Europe. And it kind of excludes a whole lot of cultures, eh? That's what
Oh, that's
readers
so interesting.
expect in
Yeah.
fantasy. Another thing is in libraries, sometimes they will have a genre just called international. In other words, everything
It's
else.
like the grocery store aisle.
Yo, no, literally, it just like classifies the entire rest of the world that isn't
That's
Western into
international.
everything else. Like, if that's not cultural stifling,
Where
I
am
don't
I
know
going to
what
go
is.
look for my Cool Running seasoning in the international aisle? Hopefully it's there.
The
No, it's
last
true
thing,
though.
yeah, it's true, it's true. The last thing is pigeonholed authors. Stephen King in horror. Lots of fantasy authors get stuck in this too. And it sucks for authors because they don't
Yeah.
want to be forced to write these things, you know?
Right. Or like maybe if something is like now we say dramedy, right? For the drama and comedy, but if it's more drama or more comedy, that author has to deal with just overall being that kind of author. A
Hmm.
comedy author, and doesn't necessarily, you're almost like typecasting your authors. That's such an interesting point though, especially the one you made about fantasy world building and the lack of exploration, because maybe authors feel like, or maybe us as readers feel like, we can only understand fantasy as this world, or these elements, these parts of Europe. Huh. Now, do you think that
Hmm.
it is that intense for, or can be that intense for all genres, though? Like, I'm thinking things that are nonfiction don't necessarily have to deal with the cultural stifling.
That's true. That's true. I don't really think it's an issue in memoirs and nonfiction because, I mean, like it or not, nonfiction is fully based in the real world. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, unless they're lying, but like if that's the case, then it's a bad book. But they're like firmly set in the real world, and the real world is multicultural, and that's representative in the books themselves.
And to be representative or accurately representing is part of the weaving of the books, right? Like, you can't just not. How about things like historical fiction, though? Because then we get into this problem, as I stated last week.
Yeah, you've made your thoughts known with historical fiction, which is a really popular genre. That's another somewhat vague one because I sometimes I take it to be a genre where it's that's another one that's like a secondary genre tag because it
Mm-hmm.
can be like romance set in a historical fiction setting. So it's like any book that's set in like a date earlier than I don't know the 1900s because it still feels like the 1900s are contemporary enough at this point,
Yeah, that's true.
right?
Hmm. Do you want to talk about some of these other subgenres and genres in
Yeah.
general that could specific? I'm gonna tell you, I have no idea what half of these are. More.
So yeah, so
Break it
Niz
down for us,
touched on
Diego.
this. There are so many genres that you did not know existed, and this is kind of fun. And honestly, this speaks to some of the power of sorting things into genres because it kind of opens your mind to what is out there and what you might find interesting.
Hmm.
So I have a list here of kind of niche genres. Most of these are subgenres, but I'm still going to get into them. Right. The first one is didactic. A didactic novel is a book that's meant, it's a fiction book that's meant to teach you about something, very specifically about something. One of the most popular didactic books is Moby Dick. It teaches you about whaling more than anything, but it's a fiction book. It's just in the process of
Oh.
enjoying the story, you learn about whaling. You can read books that are set in a fictional setting, but they teach you a whole lot about um, medieval political structures. Like it's explicitly made to teach you something. Could you see yourself reading something like that?
Yes, but not on purpose. It's more like a reflection after, where you're like, oh yeah, I learned so much about this. Huh.
The key thing is that it's explicitly made to teach you about something.
Oh, then no.
Animal Farm by George Orwell is also a popular didactic book. Next one is
Because of
Cli-Fi.
the farming? Because the
No, it has nothing to do with farm. It teaches you about the dangers of authoritarian regimes and
politics.
how they come
But
to be.
okay, see, I was thinking this was more of like a skill based thing. Or I guess it
None.
could
Well,
just
not
be like an
strictly.
understanding of.
Just an understanding of. Yeah,
Okay, that
exactly,
makes sense for
exactly.
Animal
Yeah,
Farm then.
exactly.
All right.
Next one is Cli-Fi. Cli stands for climate change. So it's
Oh,
science fiction based on the adverse effects
oh
of
my
climate change
God.
far in the future. So if you want to have some existential dread regarding the inevitable destruction of our planet, then this is the
Are
genre
these
for you.
real? Like, you gotta be
These are
super
real.
fans.
These are established genres that have Wikipedia pages and lists of books that are
Stop.
associated with them.
But the thing is, like, you gotta be so into sci-fi to understand that this is a subcategory, right?
A cli-fi, yeah.
Okay. All right.
And just another popular way of sorting sci-fi books is by hard science and soft science.
Mm,
Soft science meaning it's like borderline magical, where it really doesn't even try to explain the science of how these spaceships move around and how the technology works. Hard science is based on real science with some stretches and use of imagination, but it's mostly based on really strong science.
okay.
Project Hail Mary is a really popular book that definitely falls into hard science. Cyberpunk is kind of it definitely is a sci-fi genre, but it's based in a dystopian future with a ton of really cool technology. So it's the
Isn't that just
combination
all
of
sci-fi? Okay.
advanced
Nonsense.
technology, but a very dystopian urban setting.
This is so interesting. I
There's
really,
there's
before
something for
this,
everyone.
yeah, not just that, but I used to just say, like, sci-fi. That's for you sci-fi lovers. And that was it. I had no idea it got so specific.
Okay, so there's also the hardcore versions of mystery and fantasy, respectively.
Okay.
In mystery, you would call that hard boiled, meaning meaning a mystery where it doesn't shy away from graphic violence and explicit sex and lots of swearing and rugged characters
Oh,
and
okay.
very dark themes.
I would not have thought
Hard
of
boiled,
hard-boiled to explain that. All right.
yeah, hard boiled because the main characters tend to eat hard boiled eggs because that's
Stop.
the most manly thing to eat. It's the most manly
What?
way to prepare an egg. Very rugged.
Okay. All
Yeah,
right.
because picture it like this.
They need the
A
protein. They
very,
don't have the
very
time.
rugged man would see food as just being fuel. And if there's any food that's just fuel, it's an unsalted hard boiled egg.
So this is a on his characteristic, even if he's not seen caught eating hard-boiled eggs, like he's just a hard-boiled egg guy. Okay.
He's just a hard boiled egg kind of guy. It says a lot, you know?
And now the whole book is hard-boiled. The whole genre.
And in fantasy, that equivalent is grimdark. So I like to say that it's fantasy about terrible people doing terrible things to other terrible people for terrible reasons.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's the emo of mystery. Okay, I like it.
Yeah, it's very emo,
Fantasy.
but
Yeah.
it's often these books always have lots of character deaths and torture and really terrible characters.
Sounds like my type of mystery. Or what did we say this is again? Fantasy.
Fantasy, yeah.
Okay.
All right, ladlit and chicklit. So ladlit is
Yeah, can we
about
guess?
young
Male
men.
protagonist.
It's usually pretty irreverent. But one of the key things, it's meant to be very relatable. So their lives are pretty mundane. But it's just them doing observations in their very mundane lives. But keyword here is mundane, and chicklit is the same. It's the female equivalent of that one.
Yeah.
Ladlit and chicklit. It's always young
Sounds
adults. It's
very
kind of like a coming of age book, but it's very relatable and there's nothing like fantastical about it or anything. It's just mundane and relatable.
And this is just any kind of any kind of fiction?
Yeah, any kind of fiction. This does seem like another secondary genre tag, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I can see
Ladlit.
this going right next to YA. Confuse the hell out of everybody. Just like the most generic book ever. We don't know what's gonna happen.
Romance has a million subgenres. Chivalric romance, that's a romance set in like medieval Europe with knights going on quests for their damsels. if you're into that. I didn't mean to laugh if you like chivalric romance. No judgment here.
And wait, this is does it have to be fantasy? I guess because it feels like you would only.
It's like historical fiction, you know.
Oh God! If you're not more confused at the end of this discussion, I can't imagine. Okay.
All right, medical romance. That's a
Grey's
romance set in a
Anatomy?
hospital. Yeah, like Grey's Anatomy. Yeah, exactly. It's established. There's tons of books like this.
Okay.
Misery lit. That's like trauma porn, where it's literally. The
Pardon
funny thing
me?
is, this is nonfiction. This is nonfiction. It's
Okay.
literally like memoirs of people talking about how miserable their lives are and just
Oh,
how
I
horrible
see.
things have gone in their lives.
It sounds insulting.
Yeah.
Misery lit? We're just reducing this person's story to a sob story? Like, okay, here's another pity party memoir.
Yeah, I don't know if the authors want to be classified as misery lit,
No,
but
because now I'm thinking, like, we talked about Britney Spears' memoir. I feel
that's
like,
kind of misery
oh
lit
my
too.
gosh. Sorry, Britney. Oof.
Okay,
No
last one I want
breaks
to
for
get to
Britney.
is lit RPG. This one is surprisingly popular. This is it's kind of like a fantasy sci-fi genre where the world is kind of set with video game rules. So it's like a book set in a video game world where characters have levels and perks and items and they
What?
level up and go on quests and stuff.
So it's a readable video game.
It's a readable video game. And this is kind of fun. Since I went blind,
Mhm.
very few video games are accessible to me now. But reading Dungeon Crawler Carl was kind of a throwback for me. It was really fun to actually play a video game that way. I say play a video game because that's what it feels like when you read these books.
That's amazing. But you're not choosing things.
You don't
You
choose
don't
anything.
act.
Yeah.
I would think that that's like only the boring parts of a video game. But I guess it's, and I would think, like, isn't that like story mode, which is just a story? But no, you're saying there's more video game in that, like leveling up.
Well, the story mode of the video game still involves a whole lot of game-y aspects, right?
Yeah, true.
So, like, for example, in Dungeon Crawler Carl, like, the first act is about, like, him getting through level 1 and picking up items, and then, like, he meets friends along the way and gets perks and tries to figure out, like, the rules of the game and stuff like that. Like, it's really a video game set in a book.
Yeah, but I'm so curious about how that would actually sound or, portray itself.
Well, speaking of how it sounds, the audiobook for Dungeon Crawler Carl is amazingly produced. Like one of the best recorded audiobooks I've ever heard.
Lots of sounds and music?
Yeah, lots of
Okay,
sounds.
okay.
Not too much music, but just in sound effects.
Yeah.
It's so well done, very tastefully done.
Okay.
Something else I
Sick.
wanted to get into was I like the way Goodreads, the website for tracking your read library and what you want to read,
Mm-hmm.
the way it handles genres and tags, I feel it could be a model for how we assign genres in the future.
Yep.
Because it's not done by the publishers, it's done by the readers after they read. So the way it works is after you read a book, say you read book X, you can go give it a rating and then add it to your shelves. You can have a shelf that's, for example, a fantasy, romance, mystery, whatever you want it to be. And
Yeah.
you get to choose, and you can put it in multiple genres as well.
It's
So
like a
if
review and
lots of
rating
people,
system.
yeah, exactly.
Practically.
If lots of people do that, what ends up happening is under any given book, you're going to see like, here are the shelves that people have most sorted this book into. And that'll give you a really good idea of what this genre is all about. But the best thing about that is it kind of democratizes
Yes, it
genre
does.
identification. And it's more than just one rigid genre tag.
Exactly.
Sometimes you can have like 5 or 6 or 7. It gives you a really good idea.
Yeah, obviously it's more than just genre also, right? Like there are a lot of tags that are not necessarily genre, but still it helps with this genre part of it because you're not necessarily reviewing and rating or picking up based on some algorithm based or predetermined category, and then you get to do the same. Like, so even if you pick something off the most categorized as blank shelf, you can read it and then decide if that's where you would put this or put it somewhere else. I do like Goodreads in this sense.
The only problem is I don't think it's really like it hasn't really taken off on Goodreads. Like not everybody adds stuff to shelves. Like you need a whole bunch of keeners to make it official. Like
Yeah.
if you go to like really popular books, like the top tag will only have been assigned that tag by like 5 or 6,000 readers, and you kind of need more to make that like really official, right?
Well, maybe after understanding the full-fledged conversation around genre, aka listening to this podcast, they will do better at helping us along, because I swear I'm more confused than ever before after
Right.
this
Like
discussion.
what are we supposed to make of all of this
Yeah,
conversation?
exactly.
Like, genres are useful, but they're also really not useful. I
Yeah.
don't know what to
They're
make of it.
helpful,
But
but they're not.
yeah, so
You're a
I've been
genre, I'm a
pondering
genre.
about this topic for weeks,
Mm.
and what I've really settled on is that there's no better way to sort books. It's
Yeah, but also we're not just sorting in genre. Like the thing is, half the genres we talked about, granted, yes, half the genres we did talk about, I would say these are cool, like realistic. But other things we talked about, I'm like, these aren't even genres. Like, get this out of here.
like YA and
Y-
TikTok books.
Exactly. Those are just trends.
It
Okay.
is silly.
Target audiences. Oh, I wanted to say this. It is helpful, even though I don't categorize these things as genres, it is helpful to find representation. Okay, like representation is huge. We talked about accessibility already, but especially when we're talking about like including communities in our awareness, indigenous reads, LGBTQ plus reads,
Yeah,
disability
very
protagonists,
important. Yeah.
stories. Yeah, when we're talking about inclusion in these ways, though they're not genres, if we use these tags, LGBTQ plus fiction, indigenous fiction, indigenous history, whatever, we're just becoming more aware, right? Like it's just more ways to understand the contents of a book and the representation of communities. So in that case, I will support.
And that's a popular tag that you see on Goodreads is LGBTQ
Yeah,
and POC
yeah,
and
exactly.
disability representation. You see a lot of those tags.
Before we go to break and get into part 2 of the episode, a whole different conversation surrounding our book club question, let me give you the 3 books that are up there at the Center for Equitable Library Access. So if you go to celalibrary.ca, here are the 3 featured titles. The Armor of Light. This is Kingsbridge number 4, the number 4th book, and it's by Ken Follett. This is a historical fiction. Oh, one of my favorite genres. Also,
We're
there's
going to be very critical of the genres in this
I
list.
know. The second one is Starling House by Alex Zaharo, and this is romantic suspense. Wow, we didn't even touch
Oh.
on that genre. And the third one up there is The Running Grave by Robert Calgrave, and this is gentle mysteries. Are you kidding me? Okay.
So I looked this up. A gentle mystery is otherwise known as a cozy mystery, and that's a
Oh, we talked
mystery.
about this.
Yeah, it's a mystery set in a very intimate setting, like small
Small
communities,
town,
and
yeah.
yeah, and it's typically not violent or extremely I don't know, criminal in nature.
Mm,
Sometimes it's just like, I don't know, stolen artwork or like who put too much salt in the soup. Like
yeah.
it's just
And then
like
if you
very very kid friendly mystery.
it's not Gone Girl. And if you add the murder, then what does it become? Slightly less gentle mystery. Jeez.
After the break,
Yeah.
after the break, we're going to get to our book club question, which is, what are some books that left you with strong mixed feelings? Something that left you equally enthralled and frustrated. We'll be right back. You're listening to AMI Audio.
Welcome back. Part 2 of AMI Audiobook Review. We just wrapped up conversations around genres and categories of books. But now we're going to move on to a book club question. Jacob, you posed this to Amir's Evening Book Club and stragglers and everybody else we could find in our own communities of readers and audiobook listeners. What was the question?
What are some books that left you with strong mixed feelings? In other words, a book that had you equally enthralled as it was frustrating. I find one of the key things with books like this is it feels like it was untapped potential. Like there was one specific thing about it that just brought it down, where if that wasn't a problem, the book itself would have been amazing, a 10 out of 10, a masterpiece. So that's why these
Whoa.
books are so frustrating, because they're so close to being amazing.
You know what I hear when you say that? I hear like, I could have made this book better if I had some leeway to
Don't
write
we
the rest
all
of it.
do that?
Yeah, exactly.
We're all the best editors in the world.
The types
Obviously.
of books that makes me frustrated is when there's unanswered questions at the end and you're like, okay,
Like
Yeah,
cliffhangers?
unresolved. Yeah, yeah.
Unresolved. Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. But sometimes, like, you have to weigh it out, right? Like, you have to legit put it on a scale and say, okay, but was the rest of the book so good? But this one thing pissed me off so much that I'm struggling. like I'm left to think I don't know if I loved or hated this book.
Yeah, sometimes it's more than just a nitpick. Sometimes it really is a giant weight
Yes.
that's bringing the entire book down. It's not
Okay, give me an
just one
example
tiny little nagging thing.
for
Let's get
you.
into I'll start with my first answer, and that's the Wheel of Time series by Robert Jordan, which I've talked about a couple times in the show
Mm-hmm.
already. But great characters, great plot, great world. The characters have a tendency to be super emotional in a way that's really frustrating. Like when they're sad, they are just inconsolable and giant babies. When they're angry, they just have fits of rage. It's super frustrating that they can't just be adults and manage their emotions in a way that's healthy. I swear to God, it drove me crazy throughout the book, and it's every character too. Like there's like one character whose main character trait is that he's stoic, and I like him because of that, because he's the only one that's like a a well-adjusted adult. Everyone else, even the adults, just act like children, and they just like lose their crap all the time.
You just wanted somebody to ground this book, huh?
Yes, no, seriously, it's like all the characters, man, they're so petty.
Who's gonna come in? Who's gonna fix this cast?
You know, they're just like, I'm not helping you because you did that to me 3 years ago.
Oh,
Ugh,
are you
it's high school
serious?
stuff. Yeah,
But
it's
this
high
was
school stuff.
such a big series.
I think part of the reason why it's so long, it's because the characters are just not
They can
willing to
never get
work
it together.
together. They can't get it together. But it's
That's
funny because the
hilarious.
characters are really well realized in that way. Like they're very believable. Their motivations are understandable, and
Okay.
I appreciate that. It's just too much, so
So you're willing to be
too much.
patient with them to a degree.
Yeah, exactly. Well said. Well said.
Okay, you're the only
What about you,
adult.
Rams?
Okay. This novel we read for the K&R book club, I don't know, a couple months ago. It's called Hench, and it is by Natalie Zena Walchuk. Honestly, okay, first of all, this was what do they call it? An anti-superhero, like an anti-hero novel, right? Where the villains are the ones taking over, the superheroes are painted in the devastating light that they are, and it was an interesting read. I felt like the characters were interesting. The writing itself was quite clever. The main character just, kept you laughing, kept you engaged. The pacing was good. There was so much
Mm-hmm.
movement and action through the book.
Right.
All of these on paper, brilliant. But at the end of the day, this was my first time picking up a novel like this in this quote genre. And I wasn't convinced that I could pick up another one. I think I put in so much expectation into this book being a recommendation from a friend, and B, the first time me dipping my toes into this genre and thinking, okay, if at the end of this book I don't feel like I can pick up another, like I've been opened up to this new world, then it's going to fall flat. And whatever it was about this book just fell just flat of me wanting to pick up something else. I was like
Huh.
trying to compare it to things that I've already read, superhero novels or superhero TV shows and series for that matter, and think like, why didn't it feel like it could get me interested again? Or why wasn't I able to close this book thinking, okay, that's awesome. I actually thoroughly enjoyed this. I don't know, it felt just flat. So it's not this overwhelming feeling of like, oh God, I was so frustrated by the end of this book. It was just that meh, like it was good, but not great. But it still feels like mixed feelings because I had so many expectations of what it could be, especially while reading the book. Like, oh, this is about to get better. No, it didn't.
So it sounds like the mixed feelings came from your expectations going into it more than anything.
Yeah, it just felt lackluster compared to what I thought it would be. And as I said, elements felt like really good theoretically,
Theoretically,
but not great as
just
I
poorly
read through.
executed.
Yeah,
Was it gimmicky?
I wouldn't say so. No,
Okay, so that wasn't the issue. It was
no.
just your recommendations.
It was just, yeah, exactly. And
Right.
people, like, it's interesting to explore this question of mixed feelings and what that means for different people. Because we've had some good answers from the book club.
Yeah, I think To clarify what mixed feelings means, like it's okay to read a book and just think, meh, 5 out of 10,
Yeah,
right? Like, and it's not that complicated. But sometimes you have books that's hard to rate. They're really, really hard to rate, and I think that's what this category falls into.
exactly. Yeah.
We have an answer from Remy from London, Ontario, that I think is pretty kind of points to this. The Harry Potter series is like this for me. After I
No.
watched a couple of videos on YouTube that point out all the plot holes and character inconsistencies, I find it hard to take the series seriously anymore.
Stop
All the
it.
continuity errors ruin the immersion for me. I still love the series, but I don't think I can ever truly enjoy it the way I used to. Okay.
That's why you don't watch the YouTube videos, Remy. Come on.
This is nostalgia. This is nostalgia keeping your love of this book
Yes,
alive.
it's true.
Because do people pick up Harry Potter in 2023 and really enjoy it
Obviously, yes,
the way
we
we used
do.
to?
Sometimes we have to skip through some chapters and certain book can't get picked up the same way, but yes, Jacob.
That's a biased answer.
So why would
Very
you bring you
biased.
should have told me to mute my microphone.
I should have muted it for you.
But Remy, no, I feel you though, because it's true. It's nostalgia, as you said, Jacob, keeping our love alive. Also, there's just too much chaos coloring the books now. There's too much accessibility to people's mean thoughts about Harry Potter and pointing out plot holes. And also, if I could just say, the author herself, right, is facing a lot of critique and yeah, just dissonance
Mhm.
from Harry Potter lovers and the community, and so you're almost teetering on like whether or not Harry Potter itself should be canceled.
I'm gonna not so subtly shoo this conversation along because we're gonna
Fine.
be talking about this in a future episode.
This is a response from Sharon. Sharon Johnston was giving us her response on mixed feelings. And she said, to answer your question, I have to say the book that had me very intrigued but regularly had me frustrated was Demon Copperhead. This was a recent recommendation for the Evening Book Club, by the way. I just finished reading this book. I loved it, but it both had me intrigued and throughout the book had me very frustrated. Seeing the young boy turning into a man, having all these opportunities, but also being let down by close friends, family, and even the system. It was just so frustrating that when you thought that things were looking up for him, something else would let him down. For me, this book was well written in that way. But as she said, she was frustrated throughout. Do you think that this is an interesting way of mixed feelings?
It's frustrating to the character as well, so naturally it's gonna be frustrating for the reader.
Hmm.
But that's frustrating nonetheless. If nothing good happens to your character, we're just falling into the misery lit part of this. You know?
Oh,
That's what it must
true.
feel like. It's just depressing, and you're like, "Ugh, what is there good in this book? I'm just watching someone's life fall apart, and not everybody wants to read that."
Yo, that's such a good point. So, okay, now misery lit, except that was for nonfiction, right?
Yeah,
Anyways,
that's right.
doesn't matter. But this kind of thing is making sense to me because Girls Burn Brighter, and I cannot remember the author's name, but that book was just, yeah, she's just getting beat while she's down, this main character, and she's traveling all across the country, then around the world, trying to get out of her situations, and you keep building up hope that she's going to get better and better and better, and never. Like, it just gets worse and worse for her,
Yeah.
from limbs being torn to all kinds of other emotional and physical abuse to,
Jeez.
oh my god, just falling down the ladder of social acceptance. It was unreal to me. And honestly, there were actually several people in the book club who put it down halfway
Oh,
through, or because they just were like, does this actually get better? I don't think it's
it
getting
was
better.
too heavy. It was
Yeah,
too heavy,
way
right?
too
And it
heavy.
wasn't bad. It
Mm,
wasn't bad because of writing.
yeah.
It was just bad because of the content. It's too heavy.
It's
It's too much to read.
it's too triggering. It's too, yeah, exactly.
All right, here's an answer from Amr Khan. The Ninja by what's his name? Oh my god, Eric Van Lusvader. That's a cool name.
Mm-hmm.
The author is amazing at suspense and plot direction, but has this habit of just cheapening out with strange things at climactic moments. I read 2 of his books and couldn't get enough. In the first book, there's a massive buildup between the good guy and the bad guy, and the epic fight that is set and starts to happen. Then an earthquake kills the bad guy and dies. In the second book, one of the main characters is a billionaire tycoon and is in a big time negotiation with a Japanese firm. Nearly a third of the way in, the guy dies. Wait, some people just die in the middle? Yeah, that sounds anticlimactic.
What's even being pulled now? Who do we vote for? Everyone's
Oh
dead.
my god. Albert, you're going to have to elaborate on that.
Yeah,
What?
wait.
We'll talk next time,
And then
okay?
his last line was like leaving the reader wondering what on earth is going on.
Yeah, that's right. Like, why would I read on if just ridiculous things happen?
Oh god, this is so
Ridiculous,
funny.
unlikely things. And then an earthquake happens and he dies.
You know what the funny thing
Okay.
is? I was getting lots of fun texts from Amir as he was reading this ninja series, and I kept asking him, why do you keep reading this book? Because he had nothing good to say. It was like so he was so frustrated by how bad it was that you would think, okay, then just put it down. And then he astonishingly finished the first book and started the second one because, as he said, he read 2 of these books, and I was like, there's no way, dude. But yeah, I guess you can never really put your finger on it.
Listen, if you picked up the second book, the first one did something right. There's so many books you could be reading. If you're reading the second of a series, the first one was clearly good enough for you to
It's
want
good
to keep
enough.
going.
Or left
Good
you,
enough.
or some feelings were so strong that you cannot put them down. Oh, sounds like a
Yeah,
toxic
and you said it.
relationship.
Sometimes you can't. Sometimes you can't quite put your finger on it.
I know. Okay, so mine was Hello Beautiful by Anne Napolitano. This book had a lot of great lessons in it. So I enjoy reading stuff that's, philosophical, cerebral, like things that make me think, right? And I really do highly respect books that can authentically, organically do that for me. And this book had a lot of that. Basically, it's this family. There's the 3 sisters. I think there's 3, maybe more. 3 sisters who all bond with each other, who go through very frustrating and triggering and just like catastrophic challenges in their life, and we follow them through it. And then through that, you get to see how their partners interact with each other, with the other sisters. And so there's a lot of like family dynamic stuff. And I respected the way that this author brought about so many deep conversations through this book. But the writing was so mediocre. Okay, like
Okay,
unbelievable.
that's a simple breakdown. Yeah,
It is. Yeah, and it's so mediocre that I was like, oh god, I wonder if this author is actually going to get better at writing. Like, I wonder if she realizes her potential as she writes this book. And I was really hoping it would get better because I'm such a nitpicker for writing style, right? Like that's why I would sit through something like Addie LaRue and absolutely love it, even though there's zero plot, and still enjoy it because the writing was so beautiful. But it was the complete opposite, Jacob. Like I pushed myself through this book because there was so much to learn, but I was like, maybe I should have picked up an article because the writing was so bad.
just lack of execution, eh?
Yeah, as usual. I think my mixed feelings are very easy to break down, unlike some of the stuff like the Ninja with Amir Khan. What's your last book?
Moby Dick by Herman Melville.
Mixed
This
feelings.
is, yeah, mixed feelings because I brought it up in the first segment. Moby
Mhm.
Dick is a didactic novel that's supposed to teach you about whaling. That would be great if the facts that they were telling you about whales were actually accurate, because Herman Melville was just talking out of his ass. Because he said a bunch of things that were just not true about whales. He said that whales had ears that were like small as a pinprick. No, they don't. Uh, Yeah, he said
You're not
that
supposed to even
whales.
take the facts about the subject that we're supposed to be learning about?
Yeah, he just did not
That's
get them right.
problematic.
It's because Herman Melville actually worked on a whaling ship, so I guess he learned a couple things or two, but clearly didn't understand the
And
actual
wanted to write
anatomy of
the
whales.
longest book in the world about it? Okay.
Yeah, and he talked about how the way they find whales in these vast oceans is because they travel in like very obvious migratory patterns. Like they always go through these very specific paths, like highways. Except that's not true for all whales. Some whales are really, really unpredictable. It's only a couple species that do that.
Huh.
So that's another. But there's so many things like that. It's just full of non-truths about whales, and it's disappointing for what's supposed to be a didactic novel. But it's also really well written, and I mean, it's a classic for a reason.
Yeah. Sometimes it doesn't the mixed feeling come with the fact that it's a classic or a very well-known novel. This has happened to me. Where I'm like, I love this book, but I don't know. It
You're
feels a
like,
little
why?
problematic. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I want to get into an answer from my brother Andre. Strongest mixed feelings from a book has to be Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov's. I wouldn't. So I'll say it again. Strongest strongest mixed feelings from a book has to be Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov. I would normally avoid a book that tells the story of a pedophile, but I picked it up based on reputation and then couldn't put it down. Focusing on obsession, manipulation, and abusive relationships as central themes. It's so beautifully written that I found myself setting aside my outrage over the narrator's conduct
Oh,
so that I could give him a chance to tell his side of the story.
get out.
Okay, this is like a garbage human being character that's so despicable that makes it unreadable. I've come across these types of characters before, right? It's almost a deal breaker. It doesn't matter how well written it is. Sometimes the character is such a garbage human being that it overshadows everything in the book. Andre, I want to read that book because that sounds like a challenging read.
It sounds like a challenging. It takes me back to reading about reading Success by Martin Amis.
Oh yeah,
I
yeah, great
struggled the
example.
hell through that book. But at the end of it, I was like, okay, yeah, I kind of get it though.
Yeah, just thankfully these are not real people.
Oh, yeah. Oof. True. Okay. Well, let's wrap up because we're out of time, but we will be back next week. And next episode, we're bringing on Red Sail. Finally, it's been like years, Red, but thanks for finally joining us. We're going to talk about the insights and lives of professional authors like himself, and also Amir Khan's going to be back, so we'll ask him all about his mixed feelings, amongst other things that he'll talk about. Let's wrap up because we're out of time, but we will be back next week. And next episode, we're bringing on Red Sail. Finally, it's been like years, Red, but thanks for finally joining us. We're going to talk about the insights and lives of professional authors like himself, and also Amir Khan's going to be back, so we'll ask him all about his mixed feelings, amongst other things that he'll talk about.
And we also want to pose the next question to the book club for you guys so we can get as many submissions as possible. The next one is, what is your process for making a great personalized book recommendation? And what is it that makes you take a recommendation seriously? I'm calling this question the art of the book recommendation.
Nice. Yep, you can send us your feedback. Lots of different ways to do that. If you want to contribute, call us 1-866-509-4545. You can also email us at feedback@ami.ca.
Feedback@ami.ca.
That's it for us. Jacob Shemansky, Ramya Amuddin, and Nisreen Abdel Majid. We will be back for the next episode of AMI Audiobook Review. And until then, happy audiobook listening.